Guys, let's start with a very interesting story, free Dalto. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. This story happened about a year ago. It requires a lot of context, so I'm sorry about the length, but it's unavoidable. I'm also pretty sure this is going to be slightly controversial. I guess it could have gone in R/AITA too, LOL. So I work in college dorms in a sort of generic first response role. We do a bit of everything, mostly security, but also medical, fire, psych. It's a weird and often quite tough job, but quite rewarding. These dorms are kind of like a gated community a couple miles away from the main campus. At the top of this village, there's a hub where all the staff are based. It also serves as a venue for events and has some facilities for the students, catering, gym, etc., as well as a few meeting facilities in the staff area, which any department in the college can book out if they so wish. Between the staff parking spots and the back doors, there are also disabled parking spaces. Now, one day I was coming in for my 10-hour night shift, and to my dismay, I found that all the staff parking spots were occupied, which basically never happens. But I knew that the HR department had a big thing there that afternoon, in the meeting facilities I mentioned, so I figured out what was going on. And though it's not technically against the parking policy, they are college staff after all. Usually, staff who don't actually work in the building are expected to park in the visitor parking bays, not the staff parking. So I had a problem. It was 10 minutes till the start of my shift. I'm not allowed to use the student car parks. What about the visitor parking? Well, that gets locked up overnight, until after my shift ends. If I parked there, then in the morning, I'd have to go unlock the visitor parking, bring the key back, leave, and one of my day shift colleagues would have to go lock it back up. My only other option was to park down the hill. But then, by the time I got there and walked back up, I'd be late for my shift and miss the handover. You see where this is going? I want to make it clear that I would never normally park in a disabled bay. It's generally a scummy thing to do. I'm disabled myself, but not in a way that entitles me to use disabled parking. However, there are a few things to note here. Nobody ever uses those bays unless we have a disabled person coming in for an event, because the back door is key card access only and there's no bell, so it's little use to students or members of the public unless they've made a prior arrangement to be let in. There weren't any events scheduled that night, and the chances of someone disabled randomly deciding they need to park at the back of the hub, which is near nothing else, unannounced, is negligible. Never mind 3 of them. Remember, there's 3 bays in total. Besides, in the middle of the night, they could just park next to it at the side of the road, because there's about as much traffic there at night as on Route 50. So, I decided I'd park in one of the disabled bays, the one farthest from the door, next to the staff spaces. Due to the long and unsociable hours, I get to take breaks liberally, as long as it doesn't interfere with anything. In the extremely unlikely event that more than 2 disabled people had called in to park and access the building, which I'd find out about during handover, I'd just take a break right after starting, drive my car away down the hill, and walk back up. I go in, get the handover, and as expected, no one is expected to come in. I was the supervisor for that shift. Our shift patterns are rotating, and the longest in service is the supervisor. So I set up my colleagues for the shift, log on, set up the cameras the way I want them, read my emails, turn on my radio, yada yada. After a while, I get one of the guys, Phil, to cover the cameras so I can go tell a resident he's getting disciplined for vandalism. I then have one of those golden sitcom moments where I open the office door right before someone was about to knock on it. I recognize her immediately. She's the Dean of Facilities. We'll call her Karen. Now, we're not in the facilities section. We're in the auxiliary services section. So, this lady is not my boss in any capacity. She is, however, far higher up the food chain than me, so it's this awkward situation where, unless I have a great reason not to, I still have to bow down to her, or I'll get called into HR for insubordination, especially since the building we're in is technically operated by the facilities section. Some more contexts. Karen is one of the most hated figures among low-level staff in the entire college, your classic power trip box. You can practically see the perverse arousal in her eyes whenever she talks down to anyone on a lower salary than her. which is all the time, and she's pulled no end of downright evil in her many years with the institution. So a startled Karen practically pushes me back into the office. It turns out she was attending whatever event the HR department had on in the building that afternoon, and she was one of the people parked in the staff spaces out back. Now, she doesn't have an office in the building, so by convention, she should be parking in the visitor spaces. But again, that's not technically in the policy. Anyway, she saw my car parked in the disabled bay on her way back to her car. She knows who I am. We've had numerous, always unpleasant interactions in the past, and she saw my name on the staff sticker in my windshield. Karen. Where do you get off thinking you can park in the disabled bay, OP? Me. Well, nobody uses those. Karen. Oh, what? So you think you're above the rules just because it's you who enforces them? Me. Look, it's no big deal. I'll go move the car. Karen. Oh no, not on the college's time you don't. Me. I'll take it off my break. Karen. Nope. Breaks are for relaxation. Moving your car is not relaxation. Me. Well, then what do you want me to do? Karen. I want you to issue yourself the standard $70 fine. See what I mean about the power boner? Me. Are you serious? Karen. Absolutely. You need to learn that you don't make the rules. You just enforce them. At this point, I stare at her in disbelief. Now, I have a short fuse at the best of times, and I really want to yell bloody at her. But I value my job, so I swallow my pride and go write myself a ticket. More contexts there. We're essentially subcontracted by the city to do the parking and traffic enforcement for all roads and parking on college land. So the authority behind these tickets is the city, not the college. I know if I go talk to that vandal student now, I'll just let off steam at the kid unfairly, when it already wasn't going to be a pleasant talking to. And I know that sitting and staring at the cameras would just make me seethe, so I go restock the staff kitchen, then talk to the kid, and after that, I get back to the office. Bear in mind that Phil, my buddy who I put on the cameras, witnessed the whole thing. Is the Kiwant still here? I ask. She's just on her way out now, he says, pointing at one of the cameras, followed by, that's weird, she's leaving through the front. Karen regularly comes here to use the gym at the end of the workday. It's free for students and staff. That's presumably what she was doing today too, seeing as it's now been a good 45 minutes since she humiliated me. When she does that, she takes a cab home because she lives at the opposite end of the city and traffic is a nightmare at this time in the evening. And we all know it's a million times less awful being stuck in traffic if it isn't you who's driving. She then takes a cab back in the next morning to pick up her car and drive to the main campus. It's now that I make a beautiful, almost erotic realization. Yeah, I'm a hypocrite, sue me. I pull up the parking policy, scroll through it, and there it is, in delicious, bold lettering. It is not permissible for members of staff to leave their cars parked in a staff parking area during non-working hours. It then lists a few exceptions, mainly breaks and stuff like that, none of which apply to Karen. So I'm about to write a ticket when I have an even better idea. You see, our cameras are pretty snazzy. About 6 years ago, all the cameras that monitor the roadways were updated to plate recognition cameras by the city. So now, on top of 40 days of saved camera footage, we also have the plate log, which has, so far, been kept indefinitely, and can be used to figure out when a car entered the compound and when a car left, since we only have 3 entry-exit roads. I explain my plan to Phil. He has absolutely no reservations about doing me a solid and spending time going back through the plate log system to see how many times Karen has left her car parked here overnight. 4 hours later, and he's assembled all the dates. Over the past 4 years and however many months, weeks and days since the plate system came online, Karen has left her car overnight on a staggering 585. Yes, 585 separate occasions. So I log into the city's Fine Portal software. Yep, that's actually what it's called. You can only write tickets for ongoing, momentane violations. If you spot something using auxiliary systems like cameras or what have you. After the fact, You need to issue a fine by mail. I put in her office address and start entering all 585 dates, times, and copy and paste the reference to the exact part of the parking policy, as well as the city statute that gives this policy the force of law for each single one. The result is a thing of beauty, spanning 13 pages and totaling $40,950. At this point, all the guys are back in the office, so I call them round, knowing they'll all enjoy this almost as much as me. When I press log and print, I'm hit with a warning I've never seen before. The fine you are about to issue exceeds $10,000. Are you sure you wish to proceed? Everyone is dumbstruck. I start laughing, then Phil, and then everyone else. It's glorious. I print it, stuff it in a windowed, prepaid city envelope, and put it in the external mail. The city doesn't allow us to use the internal mail, nor hand deliver fines. I guess it's for paper trail reasons. The cherry on top is, I then get to also issue a ticket and put it under her windshield, because, of course, she's also there that night. Of course, the next time I come into work after she receives this, she's waiting for me in the office. Karen: what the hell, OP? Do you really think this is going to fly? Me, with puppy dog eyes: what do you mean? Karen: the ticket, the f***ing fines. Do you really think this will fly? Me: rules are rules, Karen. Karen: you know as well as I do that that's never actually been done here. Me: well, Karen, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Exit Karen, stage right. Now there's more to this, some good, some bad. I'll start with the bad. Karen ended up suing. I had to go to court on my day off. The silver lining was I was theoretically there representing the city, and so I wasn't being sued personally and had the city attorney. The court ended up reducing the fine to $10,000, which was apparently the city's maximum for post facto fines issued at one time. I guess that's why the warning was there. But Karen had sued to get the fine dismissed entirely, so it was still a victory, kinda. She also tried to take it up with HR, but the Dean of Auxiliary Services also hates her, and he stuck up for me to HR, so that went nowhere. The best thing, though? This year, I was appointed to the Auxiliary Services Policy Review Board. Last week, I managed to get the parking policy amended. It now says that if staff visits a building other than where their office is, unless they are teaching a class, they need to use visitor parking if there are fewer than 20 staff parking bays at the building and there are empty visitor bays. So, starting in June, Karen won't be allowed to park in the staff spots at all. And of course, all of us will be vigilantly enforcing that. TLDR. Karen forces me to issue myself a $70 parking fine. She ends up with a $10,000 parking fine because I suddenly become a stickler for the rules. It was perfect revenge. Karen's hypocrisy led to her downfall, and the OP used her own rigid enforcement against her. The execution was satisfying, with undeniable proof and a huge financial consequence. The next story from Graveyard Pixie. No vacation. PTO until October. Okay, I'm taking all of October off. Something happened at my husband's work last night that reminded me of this decade-old story. For context, at the time, my husband worked overnights at one of the largest supermarket operators in North America. I was about 6 months pregnant, and the store he worked in had a change in who the store manager was, and when I went shopping, I used either a wheelchair or a scooter with a cart on it due to a disability that makes it difficult for me to walk under normal circumstances. Background: originally, we had felt pretty lucky that between all the pregnancy tests I had done to confirm that yes, I am in fact pregnant, and the ultrasound, the earliest and the latest due date we had been given, all fell in the first week of September. So my husband had planned to use one of his weeks of vacation that week and then use his paternity leave after that week so he would be able to be there while I was at the hospital in recovery and for the first days of our baby's life. His boss seemed genuinely confused by the request. He was 22, single, and called his truck his baby, but had said something along the lines of, "Hey man, it's your vacation, you should use it how you want to." Then, about a week later, I came home from one of my doctor appointments to a message on the answering machine saying, "Unfortunately, I have to deny your request for vacation and paternity leave in September as someone with more seniority has put in for those days off as well. I hope this doesn't cause problems between you and your wife." I burst into tears on the spot, but my husband said he'd go talk to the person who requested those days off, explain that he asked for that time off because it's when the baby is due, and see if he could offer them something to give him those days off instead. Unfortunately, it was one of his co-workers who was going to have major surgery and needed that time off to recover. So we couldn't ask him to trade vacation weeks for us. My husband put in for time off for the second week off in September and is denied. Then he tries the third week and is denied again. But this time, his boss tells him that he won't be able to use any of his vacation time until October due to his position and who has time off. Cue the malicious compliance. We realized that because this boss was new, he probably didn't realize that my husband had been saving all his vacation days, PTO, and paternity leave. When we added up all the time, it amounted to 3 weeks of time off. And if we worked it around to start around when his days off were, he would be able to be home with the baby from October 1st until November 9th. His co-workers on the night crew and several of his friends on the morning crew felt that he had been seriously shafted by the new boss, so they got in on this plan with us. We waited until the boss's day off, and that's when my husband put in the schedule for the time off he was requesting, which was approved by the scheduling manager and the night crew manager. This was in July, so the only thing left to do was wait. Our baby was born in the early hours of the morning, about 2 days before our earliest due date after 29 hours of stage 2 and 3 labours. I ended up having an induction due to the fact I had been in early stage labour since the beginning of August, and it just wasn't progressing. When my husband called the night shift manager to say that I was going to the hospital to give birth, he told my husband to call in if he was going to miss any more days of work, and they would make sure it got covered. It wasn't PTO, but it was considered an excused absence. After I came home from the hospital, my mom started staying overnight with us temporarily to help out preparing meals, taking care of the dog, and the household chores so I could focus on taking care of myself and the baby. That first month home was pretty rough, so I was relieved when October rolled around and I finally had his help 24/7 and my mom was able to take a break. The aftermath, first up, was the 3 days of paternity leave. On the morning of the fifth day of this 40-day long vacation, the boss woke me up at 6 a.m., wanting to talk to my husband. I told him he was feeding the baby and asked why he was calling. He said he was checking in to see why my husband no-showed the night before, and I said, sarcastically, "Oh no, that's terrible. I'll go get him for you." I put the phone on speaker so my husband can talk to his boss while he's feeding the baby, so I get to hear everything. The boss very smugly informed my husband that his paternity leave was over, and since he didn't come in the night before, he would be written up for a no-call, no-show. My husband said, "Yes, I know my paternity leave is over, but my first vacation week started last night." The boss: "First vacation week?" Husband: "Yeah, I have 3. I was going to use one in September, one in October, and one in November. But since you told me I couldn't use any PTO until October, I decided to just take all of October off to be with my wife and newborn." The boss: "I'll call you back after I look into this." I don't know how I managed to stay silent and not laugh at this conversation, but somehow I did. We got a call back later that day that went something like this. Boss: "Yeah, I'm going to need you to come into work tonight. I never would have approved your request for time off if I knew you were taking the whole month off." Husband: "You didn't approve it. The night manager and scheduling manager both approved this, so I'm not coming in tonight." Boss, clearly thinking this is a gotcha moment: "I didn't approve it, and I need you to come in tonight. So you'll be here at 10 on your regular schedule for the rest of the month, or you'll be written up." Husband: "No, I won't. I submitted the request in July and you never denied my request. It's been approved by the other managers and it's already started, so it's too late for you to deny it now." Boss: "I'll call you back." After that, my husband called the union steward to confirm that he was in the clear, and they say that he is. We got another call the following Sunday, which was my husband's next day off, asking if he would be coming in that night since he wasn't listed as being on vacation in the system. Husband: Am I on the schedule? Boss: No. Husband: Then it's my night off, so no. He hung up after that, but we got a call like that every night. My husband wasn't on the schedule due to it being one of his regular days off and him not being marked as being on vacation in the system. Some of the ladies in the bakery deli section of the store put together a card shower for us and gave them gift cards since we never said anything to them about when my baby shower was or where we were registered. Oops. Later that week, I made a trip into the store one afternoon to pick up some stuff and introduce them to the baby, and my mum came along too. While we were over there, the store manager came up and said, "You must be husband's wife." I was feeling petty, so I pointed out that we would have met sooner if he didn't have a habit of running away and hiding in his office when customers approached him. I don't know if that irritated him or if he was planning on saying this next anyway, but the next words out of his mouth were, "You don't look like you need help with the baby. Husband said he was taking time off to help you with the baby because you have a disability, but I guess you don't need it, huh?" The bakery deli ladies glared at him, and my mom went pale because she knows I usually react very strongly to those comments. But my mom also raised me to be civil and mannerly, so I just smiled and said, "I hope you don't speak to your employees like that. That can get you fired. Bless your heart." And one of his employees told him I was right, so he sulked off. He seemed so desperate to find any reason he could to force my husband to come back to work before the end of the month. I started wondering if he was being petty and might try to retaliate after my husband came back to work, or if he was just desperate. So I called one of my husband's co-workers. Remember when I said new boss was 22? Well, he also had a habit of bragging about how he started working for the company as a cashier when he was 17 and worked his way up to management in just 5 years. At some point after the baby was born, District came and did a walkthrough, and it turned out his dad was the district manager, and he didn't work his way up to management. He was a Nepo baby. That burned bridges with more than a few employees. Then he turned up in a brand new truck and said, with the year-end bonus he was going to get, he could pay it off in one go. Several employees walked, including 2 on the night crew. Since my husband was on paternity leave, he had to work overnights to make up the slack. He'd never showed up to cover overnights when they were shorthanded before that, so we figured he was desperate to get my husband to come back because working overnights was cutting into his dating time. Finally, the end of my husband's vacation time came and his boss called again. "Boss, you used up your paternity leave and your vacation weeks. You're coming in tonight, right?" Husband: "No, I still have PTO days left this year, and since I won't be able to use them all between November and the end of December, and they don't roll over into next year, I decided to take them now." Boss: "Well, when are you coming back to work?" Husband: "November 10th. Boss called back the next day to tell my husband that actually he had used up his paternity leave while he was at the hospital giving birth, so he would have to use PTO to cover that, and actually he had used a week of PTO when he took me to the hospital with fake labour. So actually, he would be coming back to work on November 1st. My husband called the union steward and filed a complaint that his boss was retroactively deciding what counted as paternity leave and what counted as PTO and trying to force him to use PTO days to cover days where he either went in late or left for a couple hours and then came back and stayed late to make up the missed hours. He went in to fill out some paperwork, and we didn't hear from his boss again between then and when he got replaced at the end of the following January. Edit. To clarify some questions in the comments regarding FMLA, we didn't use it. This was us cashing in my entire husband's vacation he had for the year, as well as PTO days. We think in total it was 29 days. Plus 3 days paternity leave we stretched to 40 by only applying for time off on the days he was actually scheduled to work. At the time, the company only offered 3 days paid paternity leave. I don't recall how much they offered unpaid, or the total amount though. So we decided to just use the paid days since my parents were close by. As for why we put up with the calls coming in for so long, simply put, we were both exhausted. And as much as we wanted him to stop calling, period, we didn't want to offend him since neither of us knew how long he'd be there. We had expected him to be gone in 3 months, like most of the other rotating cast of store management had been. So when he stayed longer than that, we decided it was just easier to just deal with him long enough to enforce a boundary. It was a perfect revenge, and it was executed flawlessly. By following the boss's rigid rules to the letter, OP's husband ensured he got all his leave while exposing the boss's incompetence. The panic and struggle that followed made the revenge even sweeter.